let's say you're struggling to manifest your SP. Here's the unhinged method that I personally use to manifest my SP back into my life. It's been about a year since I made my first video about this. Over that time, I've helped other people do the same thing, manifest their people back. People have used it to manifest back boyfriends, ex-wives, situationships, even if they were blocked. So no matter what you're going through, it works really freaking well. But it's not like it came out of nowhere. I actually got it from Neville Goddard. It's probably one of his most famous stories because it was the first method that he learned from his teacher, Abdullah. And honestly, it's a beautiful story because it shows that Neville went through the very same experience that most people like you go through when you're trying to manifest something, but nothing seems to be working. So if you're in the process of struggling to figure out, how do I actually get this person back into my life? How do I bring them back if the situation seems impossible, like they blocked me, we're long distance, or there's a 3P involved? How do I actually overcome that and bring love back into my life? Honestly, I've had people come to me with some of the most outlandish stories. From ex-wives had moved out of the house. There are other people who, it wasn't somebody that they were with long term. It was literally just somebody that they went on 3 dates with, and they wanted to manifest that person back after they just basically told them, yeah, I'm not interested. I had other situations where one person was in prison and they had to manifest the person out of prison. So regardless of what your situation is, ultimately you can end up getting what you want if you know and use these principles properly within reason. But this video is an update because there are a lot of insights that I've gotten over the past year between teaching people how to do this and watching how things have progressed with me and my relationship after using this method. So I wanted to share this with you guys because there's a lot of really interesting things that came up since then. So when I first initially made this, it was supposed to be a reply to somebody in one of the Neville Goddard subreddits, and the comment was too large. So what I ended up doing was I made it a post, and a bunch of people loved it. But essentially, I mentioned that I use an unhinged method, just like saying it offhandedly. And they were like, oh, well, what was the unhinged method? So I can avoid it because I used other manifestation methods and they didn't work for me. And I let them know, like, no, you don't have to avoid it because it actually works. But I warned the person to tread lightly because if you use this method, you'll look crazy. If you tell people what you're doing. The method actually works because it was the first thing that Neville was taught by his mentor Abdullah when he desired to go to Barbados. So this is the Barbados story. You probably know Neville Goddard, and some people might have heard of Abdullah, but Abdullah was an Ethiopian rabbi who not only taught Neville Goddard, he also taught Joseph Murphy. So if you've studied anything talking about the subconscious mind, understand that Joseph Murphy was one of the guys that popularized a lot of the concepts in the self-help space, talking about the imagination and the subconscious mind. Most people who talk about and discuss the subconscious mind understand that the lineage goes back to this Ethiopian rabbi who taught it not only to Joseph Murphy, but also to Neville. Now, the reason why I called it the unhinged method is because I look freaking crazy when I used it. Now, that's actually because to the uninitiated, they don't understand what you're doing. This is part of the reason why in the Bible and also Neville spoke about not speaking about the thing that you're trying to manifest in the act of doing it, because it doesn't align right. It doesn't come across regular in everyday conversation. So it's not polite to talk about, because you end up ignoring all the things that people call facts and speak your desire as a fact, even though it seems false, knowing that in the act of doing that, you will turn your desire into your reality. And I knew that I definitely looked unhinged when I stood there in a tiny cramped bathroom on a farm when I affirmed that she was mine to her face. Now, I watched her face twitch in disgust as she hissed that she was in love with somebody else before she screamed that she hated me. So if you're in a situation where you think it was bad, I could have folded in that moment, but I didn't. I pulled in Abdullah. You see, when Neville first came to his friend Abdullah with the desire to go to Barbados, Abdullah simply waved to him and said, "You're in Barbados." That's it. To Neville, he sounded unhinged because the 3D circumstances around him made what Abdullah said seem impossible, because this is going on in 1933 in New York, smack dab in the middle of the Great Depression, which means Neville had to make sure to emphasize in the story just how broke he was in this situation. That man stood on stage and said he had no money. He said not a little bit, but none. No money at all, because who in their right mind would go to pay to see a dancer on Broadway when you didn't have money to buy food? And on top of the fact that Neville's situation was that he didn't have money, when he went out into the world, every day he goes outside, he's seeing seas of people who are like sleeping in the New York City parks and the Holland Tunnel as far as the eye can see. He just sees unemployed homeless people all over the place, the super long soup lines. So his 3D, his experience, and all the other people that he's seeing around him are in struggle and lack. So when Neville shared his wish, saying to Abdullah, "Ab, I would love to go to Barbados. I never had a desire to go back, but now I have a hungry desire, a haunting desire to go to Barbados. Not a thing stops me but that I don't have any money." He did not expect Abdullah to reply, "As a matter of fact, you're in Barbados." Because Neville was like, "What the hell are you talking about? I'm standing in your apartment. I'm in Barbados?" And Abdullah replied, I'll do my best Abdullah here. "Yes, you are now in Barbados. And so you see Barbados. And you see America from Barbados. And you can smell the tropical lands of Barbados. And you see the little homes of Barbados. And that's all you do. You simply sleep this night in Barbados." Neville thought that Ab had lost it. The statement that he made seemed completely unreasonable, like Abdullah had gone insane. In his head, he's like, "Bro, have you looked outside? I'm standing in your living room on 72nd Street. What do you mean I'm in Barbados? Like, bank account didn't change. I haven't moved anywhere. What are you talking about?" What Neville would later learn was that Abdullah was giving him a live demo lesson that if you want something, you must now, at the moment of wanting, assume that you already have it. At the moment that was going on, Neville just left Abdullah's place, but did Abdullah's suggestion, which was to sleep in Barbados, which is what he did. He slept in Barbados. Even though he didn't fully understand it, he did it. But nothing changed for Neville over the next few days after he started doing that. Every day he woke up, bank account was still the same. He was still in New York. The soup people were lined up for the soup kitchens. It was a mess. So he was frustrated, honestly, and then he went back to Abdullah because to his mortal eyes, he was no closer to Barbados than when they spoke a week earlier. And honestly, Neville just wanted answers. So Abdullah explained, "If you are in Barbados, you cannot discuss the means of getting to Barbados. You must actually live in Barbados in your imagination as though you were there. Just if you sleep in Barbados and view the world from Barbados, that means the means will appear and you will go to Barbados. But as far as I'm concerned, you're already in Barbados because you desired it with intensity. All you had to do was simply enter it, and you enter it now in New York City, even though it is 2,000 miles across water, and you aren't going to walk across the water, but you enter Barbados and view the world from it. And if you see the world from Barbados, then you have to be in Barbados." Abdullah had already spoke the word of Neville in Barbados. And when he did it, what Neville and most people don't get in that situation is what's going on in the interaction. Neville had a desire. He had this hunger, this craving inside for something to be complete, a new reality to be around him. The moment that he had a desire with hungering intensity, a burning desire, the means to create what he wanted was already done. So instead of trying to discuss the how and mentally and logically go from "I want to go to Barbados" to "how do I get to Barbados" to being in Barbados, he told him, "You're already there. You already are this person. And if you see and think of yourself from Barbados, you don't necessarily have to come up with the how. The how will reveal itself. It will unfold to you if you already understand very clearly what the plan is. Where do you want to be?" And you have that clear image and you're seeing it as you're going to sleep. Even though Abdullah had spoken and gave that signal that let him know you're in Barbados, Neville needed the imaginary experience to join Abdullah in thinking from Barbados. He needed to become receptive to the idea and clothe it in his imagination and fill it with his feeling. Because in the act of doing that, he would put out a strong signal, which we'll talk a little bit more in just a bit. But later what Neville learned was that man is all imagination. So where you are in imagination, you must be in the physical body. Nothing exists outside of your human imagination, which is a really interesting concept because if you look around the room, like pause for a moment, like actually pause wherever you are, whether you're sitting on the toilet or you're watching this while laying down on the couch, or you're at the table eating dinner and you're playing me, which would be really cool. I like being people's dinner thing. That's really cool to think about. But look around the space that you're in. What thing is in your space that did not first exist in imagination? Between your clothes, the walls of the building, any of the appliances, the lights, anything around you, all the things that exist in the world around you, even you being in that place, the concept first needed to move through the imagination. Everything must first move through the mind before it becomes manifested or created. Therefore, if you think something, it is done, plain and simple. So what happens is you watch the journey unfold and the world will catch up to the word. All circumstances and events must bend to the word. It is law. Now, when Neville came to Abdullah, Ab spoke, "You're in Barbados." From the moment the words left Abdullah's lips, Neville was in Barbados. That was the fact spoken with authority. The God, the creative force within Abdullah stated it as fact, therefore it was. All other minds and circumstances had to bow and bend to the will of the unbending mind, which is the core of what the unhinged method is. But here's where Neville and most people get tripped up. All other minds and circumstances have to bow and bend to the will of the unbending mind. Because in any given situation, one mind, one will always prevail. If there are two people in a relationship and one person says, "I don't want to be with you," and the other person says, "I want to be with you," someone in that situation must win. One mind must win. If the person who said that "I don't want to be with you" has a strong enough conviction and a strong enough thought, if they broadcast that, the other person can acquiesce and say, "You know what? We are broken up." And they both decide. But if the other person says, "No, we are together, we're going to work it out," and has a stronger mind, the other person can say, "You know what? Maybe we are going to work it out." In either situation, it is two different competing thoughts, two different brains competing to see which one will have the stronger desire, the stronger imaginal act that will ultimately end up getting the other person to acquiesce. Because ultimately, if you believe in something and you do not bend, everybody else must bend around you. Honestly, that's what people like Steve Jobs, Henry Ford, and Elon Musk are really known for. They're unreasonable, because they understand, if I have a thought, if I have an idea and I hold on to this, what most other people consider facts are just opinions, and if my thoughts are stronger than theirs, they will just acquiesce to me. And that's how they operate. People consider them to be assholes, but they're very effective assholes. So it works, but here's where Neville and a lot of people get tripped up, is that the manifestation isn't instant. Just because you have the idea or the thought and you put it out strongly doesn't mean that the other mind will be receptive immediately, or the path of least resistance will be a quick one. Because even after Neville heard the explanation, this whole waiting game continued through October 1933. It didn't happen in a day. It wasn't instant. Neville was doing his SATS exercises for freaking weeks. But late November rolled around with what appeared to be no change. And appear is the key word, because sadly, your eyes may end up deceiving you, because you can't see the work that's being done behind the scenes in the imagination. Now, in the context of the story, to Neville's eyes, he saw that the days were winding down closer to December 6th, which was the deadline. So as the days got closer to December 6th, he knew that that was when the last boat was going to sail to Barbados, so he started getting nervous. He started getting anxious. When people are looking at what's going on, and mentally, it's like, oh my gosh, is it not happening? Is it not going on? Why isn't it showing up? Why isn't it here yet? And if you end up voicing that stuff, like Neville did, you're giving power to something that doesn't exist. Because Neville went back and tried to explain the situation to Abdullah, and he said, "Ab, I'm no closer to Barbados." Abdullah simply said to him, "You're in Barbados," before he stormed off and slammed the door in his face, showing him how to be unhinged. Because ultimately, a hinge on a door is a limitation. And the door can only open as far as the hinge will allow it. Becoming unhinged, it's the expansion of your thinking, the expansion of your language, the expansion of your actions that goes beyond the limitation of what is currently here. Abdullah was teaching Neville a lesson in faith. And I love the quote, is like, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Hebrews 11:1. You got to remember that Neville was learning from an Ethiopian rabbi. All this stuff was based in like the actual Hebrew interpretations of the Bible. Now, so in creation, there is no halfway pregnancy. If you conceived of an idea, it is finished. Even though it is unseen, you let that child grow in the womb. like we did with our son over the past year. Contradicting or interfering with that idea that you've conceived will result in a miscarriage. Faith is learning to nurture it and leaving it alone to grow. Because if it's done, there is no power outside of yourself which could stop it, which in Neville's case, no one could stop his journey to Barbados once he saw the world from Barbados. He simply needed to let the child grow uninterrupted, even if he didn't say movement beneath the surface. If you quite literally don't care and persist in your thought, the manifestation has to occur because it's already unfolding behind the scenes. Now, you may say like no movement is fine, but what do I do when I see like opposite circumstances? I can't help that these things trigger me. What am I supposed to do? 3D circumstances smacked Neville in the face every single day he walked outside of his store. He saw thousands of homeless New Yorkers standing in soup lines and sleeping in the park as a daily reminder of why his wallet was filled with nothing but flies. But to practice faith like him, you can remember this mantra: 3D circumstances mean nothing. The world around you doesn't have any sort of meaning. No experience, event, or object around you comes with like an RPG screen where you click on it and it gives you like a bunch of information that lets you know this is what this thing is. That doesn't exist. Whatever's happening and going on in your life, whatever's happening or not happening, whether somebody's texting you and what they've said or them not messaging you, ultimately there is no meaning associated with it. You just have your own assumption. This is your own self-talk. You give it meaning with your self-talk. Nobody else does. If you're struggling, then your self-talk is creating an opposing reality. And that's the interesting thing about negativity. When you realize that what you're actually doing is you are not doubting, you are creating a counter intention. You are creating the opposite of what you want, but you're still using the same power of creation. So the best thing to do is to learn how to shut up. That's one of the first things I got to tell people to do when I start working with them, is learn how, if something happens, if you don't like it, shut up. Don't say it. Now, luckily, Neville learned how to shut up. He finally surrendered. He stopped asking questions. He went back, slept, and finally was there in Barbados, fully letting go in faith, hearing the sounds of his family, his brothers, his sisters, his mother, his father, there in Barbados. And he stopped questioning. After he let go, 2 to 3 days later, Neville got a letter slipped under his door. When he opened the envelope, he found inside $50 for clothes and a letter from his brother Victor, letting him know that there were tickets for him down at the steamship company and that all of his expenses while he was on the ship were taken care of. His brother arranged everything to have Neville join the rest of the family for Christmas while Neville was dreaming away in his apartment. To the untrained observer, it looks like things would have unfolded that way without prayer. Don't be fooled. That is not the case. To the trained observer, it looks like you have reality warping abilities, but you don't. You have mind warping abilities. Here's how it works. You see, everything is imagination, and that imagination is God within us. The imagination that's within you is the same imagination that's dwelling with everyone else. They're all one and the same. There's only one human imagination. So therefore, a manifestor realizes this fact and then crafts an imaginal image so clear, so compelling, so emotionally moving, then broadcasts it powerfully that it's picked up by other receptive minds. Their minds pick up on the images and the feeling, and they begin to desire the same thing. And from there, they act upon it. Neville didn't have access to money for a ticket because he didn't need it. Neville had access to a mind which he used to clearly broadcast the image of what he desired. By persisting in the thought, the God within him broadcast a clear mental image which acted upon the receptive imagination of someone else with the means to make it a reality. To Neville's eyes, nothing had changed, but his imaginal act rearranged the imagination and desires of his older brother. Neville imagined himself in his family home for the holidays with his parents and all his brothers in the rooms. His brother imagined the same and took the action to make it happen. Neville didn't know about this as October and November passed, because the manifesting mind doesn't need to know the how. This is why people say, like, you don't need to know the how. It's not important. It, meaning you, just needs to broadcast a compelling image of the wish fulfilled that arouses the feeling of being there. The greater mind will shape the imaginations and thoughts of others to make it come to pass. You broadcast having $20,000 in the bank. Suddenly, because you do that, desire is aroused in people with money to buy what you have to offer. You're magnetically guided to each other until the money moves from their account into yours and their desires are satisfied. When you set out a clear signal, you become the answer to each other's prayers. You broadcast being with your SP. Suddenly, desire is aroused within them. They start to notice all the wonderful things about you. They start remembering all these amazing moments that they've had with you, or start fantasizing about things that they could do with you and how much they want to be with you. They feel a desire. They feel something within them. And then they start fantasizing about fulfilling those desires. They end up yearning for you until they end up breaking and call you or text you and confess their feelings or ask you out. Because there's only a matter of time of having a burning desire until you take some form of action. But honestly, when it comes to love, part of the fun is the burning and the yearning, the desire, the craving, the anticipation of what is it going to be like. Because that's a good relationship. A good relationship is when you have time to fantasize about the other person. Now, in Neville's case, through persistent thought and sats, his desire became his brother's desire. But it didn't stop there. After that moment, 3D appearances gave Abdullah another chance to really hammer in the point of how to be properly unhinged. Because other thoughts came up afterwards. Now, Neville went to pick up his ticket from the steamship company, and they told him, hey, we have your ticket and you can use the facilities of first class, but we don't have any first class accommodations. So you're going to have to go third class. And then once the ship reaches St. Thomas and somebody disembarks, then you can take first class accommodations. Now, Neville didn't really care that much. He rushed back to Abdullah because he got the good news. He's going to Barbados. Hey. So he goes to him and tells him like, hey, Abdullah, great freaking news, man. I'm going to Barbados, but I have to go first class. And Abdullah looked at him and said, who told you you're going third class? You're in Barbados and you went first class. Then he slammed the door again. And when he said that, he spoke truth. Neville at that point didn't care to argue with him, and he simply accepted what Abdullah had said with no argument. If you've heard the story before, then you know that Neville went to Barbados and he went first class. When the day to embark came, Neville slid his ticket across the counter, and instead of waving him through, the desk clerk smiled with good news. He told Neville someone had canceled last minute and that he was going first class. If you think about what happened in that situation for Neville, he went and received a declaration, a message from the steamship company the first time he went, and he accepted what they said and repeated it. But when he went to Abdullah, Abdullah set out a more powerful statement, a more powerful, wait, hold on. Now, Abdullah didn't need to do that, but he made a point. A declaration made powerfully clears the way and bends other minds. The thought and idea that came from the steamship clerk was that they didn't have anything available from what he could see. From his 3D reality, from what was going on in his world, he said, we don't have this. And he shared that with Neville, and Neville had accepted that, and he was okay with it. But instead of accepting it, when he went to Abdullah, Abdullah made a declaration. You're already there and you went first class, which was a powerful declaration. And Neville, because he didn't contradict it and just accepted it, when he went to the steamship, that's what the steamboat operator thought. Because the situation, the 3D world had changed and bent to the imagination and the declaration of one man. Remember, we're all one mind, but in different arrangements. It's all one wonderful human imagination. The unreasonable mind of Abdullah broadcast the fact, which is just a thought, a word. That random person in first class had no choice but to decide not to go because Abdullah made a declaration. When he said that out loud, the unconscious mind, the imagination, agitated the person's imagination who was going on that trip, and they picked up on that thought, and their imagination and emotions compelled them to cancel the trip. That's how powerful a spoken word is. Abdullah didn't speak to that woman. He didn't know that woman. He didn't need to, because he understood if a word is spoken with conviction and unwavering will, brazen impudence, as we say in the Neville Goddard community, other people pick up on it because it's just it's just a signal. Understand that any thought that you have, any feeling that you have is a signal, and people are constantly either broadcasting or receiving signals. That woman picked up on that signal. Neville picked up and held onto the signals. His brother picked up on the signal. And the reality was just everybody playing the play of enjoying the signal. Now, as a side note, when it comes to declarations are much easier to make for others because you're not likely to experience doubt. You're not in the middle of the situation, so you can just speak and broadcast the fact, the reality, and let people essentially quantum leap or attach themselves to the quantum reality where this is what is going on. This is what's happening. This is actually the reason why it's so important for people to have like spiritual mentors, spiritual friends, and a husband or wife. Having your lover, it's so important because you have somebody who knows you more than anyone else, who has this energy, who has this degree of authority in your life, emotional authority, spiritual authority over you. And if they speak over you, you're blessed. Because you're blessed when you have someone with faith who can speak words of affirmation over you and hold the faith when you find it difficult to hold the faith yourself. But ultimately, that's just a helpful tool, not a requirement since you could do it all yourself. But Neville didn't do it all by himself. In this situation, Neville had Abdullah. And by having an Abdullah, by having somebody who can teach you this process, it makes it far easier for you to be able to do it for yourself later on because you have somebody helping you. That's why most esoteric teachings were taught from mouth to ear, from mentor to mentee, from master to apprentice, because it was understood that when somebody had the experiences, they could broadcast the signal clearly in their speech and clearly in their feeling and clearly in their thinking to the apprentice until the apprentice was able to believe and have their own experiences, which solidified their own belief. Now, I mean, that's part of the reason why I do coaching. So if you want to know more about that, that's down in the description. But when we come to talk about testing for the method, I personally did it myself and it worked. And it's worked for other people that I've worked with. And honestly, it worked even better than expected when I first wrote about it. And then when I wrote the second update a couple of months ago, I slept in the assumption that she was mine. Now, something interesting happened in that process because change didn't happen the way that I expected. I thought the outside world was going to change. I wasn't ready for what actually happened. The sleeping part and putting myself into there was easy. Like, I slept with the assumption that she was mine, but that was the easy part, honestly. It became difficult when she was screaming at me again. She was saying that she was done with me, or so I thought at that moment. Like Neville and everyone else, when I was confronted with 3D experiences or her painful words, I wavered. I would doubt. Her words honestly would echo in my mind, with the mini movies playing on repeat again and again of her saying things or doing things. I would switch between belief and doubt depending on what the heck was going on that day. If the winds went one way, I would believe. The other way, I would doubt. But something changed that night when we were standing in the bathroom at 2 a.m. We were at her mother's farm. Our daughter at the time was sleeping in the other bedroom, and we had just been arguing, trying to keep our voices down so we wouldn't wake up her grandmother and her mom or the dogs. But like, the whole emotional experience got so heated, she was yelling at me. And suddenly, like, at that moment, her words became like a dull hum, and I was staring at her and spaced out, and I could hear Neville's words ringing in my head. "You're in Barbados." And my eyes went wide. In that moment, I stared at her. Now finally seeing what was going on in that space. "You're mine. You're mine." I repeated that to her like I just figured out that the sky was more than just blue. She was mine in that moment. When I finally softly said those words to myself, I could see all the colors that I had missed in the sunrise of my life. In the space of a few moments, I realized that the only thing that was coming out of her mouth were words that were connected to images from her mind, her imagination. She was sharing with me her dreams and the world as she could see it. Up until that moment, I held anger and resentment that she would desire and dream of a life without me. I remember when I first had made my imaginal act, I thought I was going to change her. I wasn't expecting that I was going to change myself. Because I softened when it finally dawned on me that she was just desperately dreaming of a way out of the nightmare that I had created. Like Neville, when he was in New York, she was looking at the state of how the world was around us. Depressing. We had lost everything at that point in our lives. Our apartment, our friends, our livelihood, because like the whole marketing business that I had just completely collapsed after the death of a major client of mine, which there's no excuse because I turned our lives upside down. So she moved back to her mother's farm before she broke up with me. And in my heart, I clung to the haunting, hungry desire for us to be together. But I had lost sight of what she wanted. I was being a terrible partner. I had gotten so wrapped up in my imaginal scene, what I had wanted, that I didn't realize that the images that I was creating kept us in the very same place that she was trying to escape. So when I gave up and simply spoke that we were together as a fact, once I thought that, like, we were together, my fuck up became as clear as day. Because I realized that I was trying to fight her idea and keep her there instead of coming up with a better freaking idea, coming up with a better dream to share with her. The words that she spat to me came from dreaming of a better life because she got tired of waiting for me. It wasn't that she was a bad person. She just hated that I had stopped dreaming of a better life for us, that I had stopped dreaming of a life with her. So she just found another dreamer. There wasn't a third party. There was just a man who spoke enough to get her to dream of a better life than what I was offering. And he was merely a reflection of my own insecurities because I just didn't think that I was enough. And because I didn't think I was enough, I manifested somebody who confirmed that I wasn't enough. But that's just because I wasn't thinking. I wasn't dreaming. I was just existing and decaying slowly and then pulling her down into hell with me. But in that moment, I'd realized that it was just a game to see whose words and images would overtake the soil in the mind of the other. Right then, I decided to see the world from the state that I was in Barbados. The trees finally took a root in Barbados inside of that tiny little bathroom, and I started to open my mouth. But I hesitated for a moment because I feared what she would think of me once I did this. Because I felt the desire to share all these new ideas. But what if I was wrong? What if this didn't work? What if she thinks that I'm crazy? I pushed those fears to the side and I decided to fully trust the law. I had used it for so many other things in the past, but this was my chance to finally use it in a relationship and really embody it in that moment. The words "your mind" became like an anchored lightning rod in the center of my being. You're mine. From that word came the state, and from that state came dreams pouring out of me. In those moments, I drew down lightning. I was dreaming out loud in present tense. And I know I sounded crazy when I did it. Like Abdullah, I spoke of our lives like Barbados. Not as a far-off wish, but like as a present fact right then and there in that moment while we stood in that bathroom. I talked about our home, our new kid, my new business. She cocked her head to the side because she was confused and a pang of fear washed over me, but I kept going. I continued. I didn't stop. And every single word that I said was like a hum in my body because it felt so freaking good to dream again. In that moment, while I'm talking about vacations and cars and wonderful stuff, she chimes in and reminds me, what the fuck are you talking about? We are currently squished in the guest bathroom on my mother's farm in the middle of nowhere, and she made sure to remind me my pockets were as empty as Neville's. But in spite of being in that bathroom, in spite of everything else, I dared to dream. My eyes saw the bathroom, but beyond the walls, those four walls, was an empty void of possibility. And in spite of what I saw or heard, I spoke my dreams as present facts. With my eyes open, I spoke about my bank accounts overflowing from the last deposit from my new business, missing the feeling of the cool tile on my feet from the bathroom inside of our new home, feeling excited for the trip that in Epcot that we booked for later that year. To me, we may have still been on the farm, but we were just visiting before we headed back home to our exciting life. But after I was done, she stared at me blankly and said that you're crazy. I smiled, and you're mine. And that was last year. When I originally wrote the post, it was actually less than 3 months of that everything had happened. And just like with Neville, things were good. The relationship had progressed, but we were still living on her mom's farm. Like, that didn't change in 3 months. We were together, but farm was still there, which means that after writing the original post, I still had to practice being unhinged every day after writing it for weeks, because getting back together was the only major thing that had changed. All the other stuff that I had talked about and mentioned to her hadn't happened yet. I conceived that night. I conceived the ideas and the dreams, but most of what I had spoken hadn't been born yet. It hadn't manifested. My bank account still looked as slim as Neville's, flies and all.
I struggled to land new marketing clients because being stuck on the farm in the middle of nowhere is not good for prospecting.
But in spite of all that, I still persisted, just like Neville did. Neville sleeping in Barbados for weeks and speaking the same way, no matter what the 3D circumstances were. When we walked around the house, I would tell her and our daughter, like, no, it wasn't our house. It was grandma's house. We're visiting grandma's house. Can't wait for us to go home. We're visiting grandma's house. And because I held faith through the roller coaster of 3D wrong circumstances while manifesting my relationship, they actually became the bridge of incidents that snowball into all the other dreams coming true. Sharing my story on the Neville Goddard subreddits started everything. No one noticed, but I was actually terrified to voice what I had done to get her back, because on one hand, I got her back, but on the other hand, everything else that I had talked to her about that night hadn't fully manifested yet. So like I had to only talk about part of it. But now, like over a year later, it was even weird for me reading what I wrote for this, because I was realizing how much has changed. Because everything I'd said to her hadn't manifested yet, and it was so close to the event, I felt like everything would unravel, but I posted it anyway. And even though I had the fear, I knew I wanted to share and help people out. And because I felt the overwhelming urge to do it, it led me in the right direction. So this is why it's super important that even if things seem scary, you act as if you act in faith. And I knew that if I acted in faith and just shared stuff, like everything would work out. I didn't know why I was feeling called, because it made absolutely no logical sense why I would be going and spending 2 days to write a fucking post on Reddit to strangers when I should have been looking for marketing clients. It just didn't make any sense. There was no clear reason on why making that post would help me, but it did. Months later, in that December, we took the trip to Epcot that she'd always dreamed of for her birthday. It was only supposed to be 2 days, but I ended up extending the trip to like 2 weeks because my business could support it comfortably. After that point, we ended up getting the house where we're at now, got a brand new car. We just had our son. So like the baby, the car, the home, everything that I had talked about in that tiny bathroom happened. When I opened my mouth, she laughed at me then, yet here we are. In the house with the kids while I work on my wonderful business as a relationship coach with clients that I absolutely adore. I love the work that I do. I love helping people attract love into their lives, whether it's attracting back their ex or moving on and letting go of all of those emotional blockages that have kept them in the same toxic patterns related to relationships, whether it's getting ghosted or being with men who are awful and terrible. For whatever reason, I wanted to let you and other people know that it always works. It always does. The only thing that may happen is that it may take a little bit of time to unfold. But you have to be okay with looking and sounding unhinged like me and Abdullah while the things unfold. Because they will. Every person who had a dream sounded crazy before it unfolded. This is part of the reason why Neville and the Bible mention to do this stuff in private and to tell no one, because when you talk to people about it, it makes you feel crazy. But if you keep your mouth shut, you seem less crazy. So a couple of notes on like how to actually do Neville Goddard sats, because I have a way of explaining it. Like, I only suggest testing the law with like this unhinged method only if you consume a large amount of reading of Neville Goddard and other esoteric materials and actually practice meditation and disconnection, because this method requires direct confrontation of the wrong appearances. You have to be able to disconnect and disassociate in the moment and remember and make a choice. You're not reacting to the world, you're responding. You have what's going on in front of you and you're willing to to be present in the moment, which is why meditation is one of the most important things that I think a lot of people should practice, so that you're able to sit there in the moment with like heavy emotions and heavy feelings, especially in heavily emotional situations, and just be fully present, witnessing another human being and witnessing what's going on in yourself until you discharge that and you can just be neutral in the situation. Now, the method is simple, but it's not easy. You essentially use the word to speak your desire as a present fact and repeat it until it's evident to all your senses. And that's what you're doing in meditation. You also change for no one or no thing inside or out. When you make a decision on what you want, you make an actual decision. You are not choosing. There's a difference between a choice and a decision. When you choose something, there's an option for something else. else. When you make a decision, there is no other option. There is only this. So if you want something, be very clear on what that thing is that you want. And that's part of why me and Neville have both recommended that people, when it comes to relationships, making sure that you focus on your end state and how you want to feel, not necessarily on the specific person. Because in certain cases, you may end up in relationships where you want somebody who may not necessarily be the best choice for you. And that may happen in certain cases with people who are abusive or something like that. I taught some of these principles to some of my clients, and one of my clients did it to bring their SP back into the life, and it almost got them killed because that person was crazy. So for you, at this point, I make it a very big point to tell people to focus on what is the actual state that you want to be in, and focus on manifesting you. You want to be married, focus on you and how you feel as a wife. You want to be married as a guy, you focus on you and how you feel as a husband. And the person that is the right complement to that will come into your life. And if that specific person, that ex or whoever it is, happens to be that person, it's very easy for them to come in, and it's much easier not to doubt. But if you want to go on life on hard mode, I'll give you if you want to go do life on hard mode and learn the lesson your own way, please, by all means, use the method, and I'll give you the outline here. What you want to do with yourself is, in the silence, because it needs to be silent, you speak the word in your mind and with your tongue of what you desire. You speak it into the darkness of yourself until subtle light forms the object of your desire right before you, right now. This will take some time and some effort, and you repeat it. You do the object. You create and construct some sort of scene that you know is going to get you emotionally involved. The smartest thing for you to do is to find settings that you already know, and characters, people that you already know, that can reflect back to you and imply the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And you replay this scene, this play, again and again until it stirs feeling inside of you. What is the emotion that you want? You do it until you feel this emotion sufficiently where you are satisfied. Because people ask the question, how do I know I impress the subconscious mind? The question is, are you satisfied emotionally in the act of doing the sats? It's not to create something in the future. It's to create something right now. How do you feel in your body right now? You're doing all of this to feel something in your body right now. And the reason why Neville told people to... Okay, baby. The reason why Neville told people to repeat stuff again and again is that people forgot that Neville's a dancer. Neville was a Broadway dancer. So Neville, as a Broadway dancer, he was somebody who rehearsed. The point of rehearsal was to get the motions right, to do them enough until you can pour more energy into the experience, like to really focus on your facial expression and how you're doing each movement. You do the repetition so that when you get to the point of performance, you're ready and your body knows what to do. And that's what you're doing in sats. You're rehearsing for your ultimate performance, and you're doing it until you feel the emotion of the scene in a way that's satisfactory. You want satisfaction in your body. You want to feel because that's the whole reason why you want the thing in the first place. That's why you want the relationship, is you want to feel something. So get very clear on what that feeling is. Now, most people will simply fold back into the old assumption when they're confronted by what seems to be the desire not manifesting, like when Neville would continually go back to Abdullah. But take no heed to other people's words and appearances, because again, there is no meaning. You're creating the meaning. It's your own self-talk. This is the reason why we listen to audios and read books. It's because we want to have a certain degree of control over our own self-talk, what we're saying to ourselves. And that's why if you're trying to manifest stuff, one of the most important things to do is to put down your phone, because you're not controlling your self-talk. If you're listening to stuff, if you're scrolling TikTok, YouTube, and all that stuff, they're controlling the way that you think. If you looked at the transcript of all the things that you're reading and all the things that you're listening to, all the songs that you're listening to, it's influencing your reality. It's influencing what's showing up for you. So if you want to get hyper specific on what you want, cut off most of that stuff. That's why in wealthy areas, you'll actually find that most of the music that's played in those places is instrumental, because they're not looking to impress their minds with anything, but they do want the emotional experience and the enjoyment of having music. So instrumentals, lo-fi works pretty well. Classical music, Baroque classical music in particular, works really well. That kind of stuff gives you the opportunity to enjoy music, but also saves you from impressions that you do not want to have in your life. Now, you may say that that's a little bit overboard, but there is a reason why we only go back to grandma's house for visits now. My word, and that is my word and my stubborn refusal to change it. To use this method, you practice ironclad faith. If something doesn't fit your assumption, then it doesn't exist, period. That's yeah. You don't repeat it. No dead appearances cross the threshold of your lips. Anything comes up in your life, you simply reframe it and fix it to fit your assumption. To act as if your SP is like, I hate you. You're like, oh, that's cute. You're so nervous around me. That's adorable. You reframe, you play, you have fun. Because you need to understand that what comes out of other people's mouths when they speak, even me, they're nothing but passing dreams, words from another mind. If you are unhinged, then other people will simply have to move according to how your hinge opens. Because most people are a little bit too polite to contradict, especially if somebody's very serious about what they're saying. It's funny because to the SP, you'll appear to have a reality distortion field where their mind bends to the playful stuff that you're saying. So no matter how angry, sad, disgusted they feel when they first come to you, you give them the freedom to accept what they're doing, but you play with it. Accept what they give to you and use it like an improv actor. You play with it. You say yes and. There's no buts. There's no no's. It's yes and. But I'm going to twist and distort what you say. But you gaslight in the positive sense, because that's one of the things that I did with my SP. It wasn't just, oh, I'm going to force you. No, I wanted them. It was an invitation. You can come along with me. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. It's going to be wonderful and amazing. So when you do this stuff, you want to make sure that you're focusing not only on what you desire, you want to be a little bit more selfless. You want to focus on dreaming something that aligns with the desires of your ideal person. It's not only you and what you desire. You have to tailor to your other person, because that's what makes you a good partner. This is what I found that works for me and has worked for the people that I've worked with. But ultimately, when you do this, keep in mind that their words and feelings are just waves that are crashing against the lighthouse of your mind, and they must bend around an immovable object. But you, as the partner, must, as an immovable object, keep that person's desires in mind so that you're aligning whatever you're doing with their ultimate desires, because you're one flesh, you're one being, you're one person. So you should treat your imagination as such and share dreams together. And that's why we do meditation and all the other stuff, is to firmly dig the foundation of your lighthouse so it is deep in the earth, so you can stand strong and unmoving and broadcast your light to the world. So dig the pen deep into the earth and speak desires as facts with commanding tone. Don't wonder, don't ask, be resolute, because other people will bend around you. And this is ultimately how, like, Machine Gun Kelly got Megan Fox. They met one day at a GQ party, and she slinked over to him and saw this guy who was ghostly over in the corner and came up to him and looked at this guy smoking at this point. And she looks at him and is like, you smell like weed. And he looks at her and says, I am weed, and disappeared in a puff of smoke like a little ninja. He didn't, and she was like flabbergasted and like questioned herself, because for her, she was confronted with somebody that she literally didn't know how to respond to, because how could somebody not care about what she thought about them? She was Megan Fox. She began to question herself, and she became curious and intrigued by this person. And that's what happens when you do this. She fell for him because in a world where everybody crashes beneath her mighty waves, she was confronted with a mysterious lighthouse. Like him, confront every person you meet this week, especially your specific person, in your mind. If you confront them in your mind, because they will show up, confront any person with a playful mindset. Be delusional and watch what unfolds when you refuse. Because the world bends to the word, not the other way around. So test it and see for yourself. Spiritual strength comes from the understanding that the world outside of us has no meaning. It only has the meaning that we give to it, through our imagination, through our speech, and our self-talk. We are the creators of meaning. We are the writers, the directors, and screenwriters of our own lives, as well as the actors. And the assumptions that we hold in our own imagination, if you hold on to these assumptions and literally think everything as you wish it to be, and you want it to be, the world bends over backwards for you. And if you do not bend, it's only a matter of time before the person you desire bends before you. But if you're going to use this ability, please use it wisely, because you should want and desire the best not only for yourself but for every person you come into contact with, especially this person. And knowing that, one of those things to show that you truly love someone, and what true love is, being willing to want the best for someone even if that is not being with you, because then you set them free and free yourself to be with the perfect person for you. Go off and have fun being a lighthouse, because every traveler is curious about what's inside.